No person more familiar with what we do than the man who created, our patron and founder of the idea of Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to all our supporters, partners and sponsors for being here. It is one of the few rooms or buildings, certainly this room, in the UK that has air conditioning, so I can understand why every seat is full. I get it. But looking around this room, I see people representing different nations, different governments, different militaries, different organizations, and of course, believes that those who have served their country, and in particular those whose lives have been changed by that service, deserve more than our gratitude. They deserve opportunity, the chance to redefine one's purpose and identity. They deserve to truly feel our admiration and respect. And they deserve every chance to build the life that they choose beyond military service. That's what the Invictus community is all about. Now, over the next 2 hours, you'll hear about programs, partnerships, policies, and practical solutions, all in the hope of making progress, which comes when we're prepared to learn from one another. For many people, the Invictus Games are the moment that they first encounter this community. They see extraordinary competitors on the field of play, incredible families supporting from the stands, and they witness resilience in its purest form. But those of us here know that the Games have never been the destination. In many respects, they and the training to get there are the beginning, the catalyst, a spark that can ignite recovery, rebuild confidence, and reconnect people with a community that understands them.
You just watched that moment for yourself. You heard the applause, you heard the introduction, you heard Prince Harry walk onto the stage at Chatham House with the kind of reception that comes from people who know exactly why he is there. Then, instead of launching into grand speeches or making the event about himself, he opened with a light-hearted joke about the room being one of the few places in the UK with air conditioning. The audience laughed, the atmosphere relaxed, and from there he turned the conversation towards something much bigger than himself, the lives of wounded, injured, and sick service personnel. That moment is worth paying attention to because it tells a very different story from the one that dominated headlines before Harry even landed in Britain. For days, much of the conversation surrounding his visit revolved around speculation. Where would he stay? Who would he meet? Would there be a reunion with members of the royal family? Would there be another dramatic headline waiting around the corner? It often felt as though every movement had become another opportunity for endless analysis. Yet, once Harry actually arrived and began carrying out the engagements he had traveled for, the focus shifted exactly where he wanted it to be, the Invictus community and the people whose lives have been transformed through it. That contrast is striking. Outside the venue, there were cameras waiting for the latest royal update. Inside Chatham House, there were representatives from governments, military organizations, charities, researchers, and veteran support groups gathering to discuss something far more lasting than a news cycle. They were there to exchange ideas, build partnerships, and examine practical ways to improve support for veterans long after their military service has ended. It was a room focused on solutions rather than speculation. The applause that greeted Harry was not the applause reserved for celebrity. It reflected recognition from people who have worked alongside the Invictus movement over many years. Since launching the Invictus Games in 2014, Harry has consistently described them as being about recovery, resilience, and community, rather than medals alone. The event at Chatham House reinforced that same message. It wasn't a celebration of one individual. It was a conversation about a mission that continues to evolve and reach new people across the world. Harry's opening joke also revealed something that has long been part of his public speaking style. Even when addressing serious issues, he often begins by lowering the formality of the room. His remark about the air conditioning was simple, but it immediately connected with the audience. It drew laughter, eased tension, and reminded everyone that meaningful conversations do not have to begin with solemnity. Sometimes a shared smile is enough to create the atmosphere needed for honest discussion. After that brief moment of humor, the tone became more reflective. Harry looked around the room and acknowledged the remarkable mix of people gathered there. Different countries, different governments, different military services, different organizations, different experiences. Yet, despite those differences, he suggested there was a common belief that united everyone present. Those who have served their country, particularly those whose lives have been permanently affected by that service, deserve more than words of appreciation. That single idea deserves closer examination. Expressions of gratitude toward veterans are important. Across many countries, public ceremonies, remembrance events, and commemorations remind us of the sacrifices made by service personnel. But Harry challenged the audience to think beyond gratitude alone. Appreciation, he argued, should lead to opportunity. Veterans deserve the chance to redefine their purpose after service. They deserve support in rebuilding confidence, rediscovering identity, and choosing the future they want for themselves. It is a powerful distinction because leaving military service is rarely a simple transition. For many veterans, the uniform represents more than a profession. It represents community, structure, identity, and shared purpose. When that chapter ends, whether because of injury, illness, or the natural conclusion of a career, many face profound questions about who they are and what comes next. Physical recovery may be only part of the journey. Emotional recovery, rebuilding relationships, finding meaningful employment, and reconnecting with society can be equally significant challenges. That is where Harry believes the Invictus community makes a difference. He reminded the audience that, while many people first encounter Invictus through the games themselves, those who know the movement understand that the competition is not the final destination. The games are often the beginning. They become a catalyst that encourages recovery, creates confidence, and reconnects people with others who understand their experiences. That message may be one of the most important ideas Harry has expressed about Invictus over the years. To someone watching from home, the Games may appear to be an international sporting competition, complete with opening ceremonies, national teams, and medal events. Those moments are inspiring, but Harry encouraged the audience to look beyond what is visible on television. The months of preparation, the friendships formed through training, the personal milestones achieved during rehabilitation, and the renewed sense of belonging are often the true victories. In many ways, the medal ceremony is only the visible chapter of a much longer story. Long before competitors step onto the field of play, many have already overcome obstacles that once seemed impossible. Some have relearned basic physical skills after life-changing injuries. Others have confronted invisible wounds that cannot be seen by spectators. Many have rebuilt confidence after periods of isolation or uncertainty. By the time they arrive at the Games, they have already traveled an extraordinary distance. Harry's remarks reflected an understanding that recovery is rarely linear. There are moments of progress, moments of frustration, and moments when setbacks seem overwhelming. Yet communities like Invictus remind participants that they do not have to face those moments alone. Shared experience creates understanding in ways that are difficult to replicate elsewhere. A conversation between two veterans who have walked similar paths can sometimes provide reassurance that no formal program could ever fully replace. That emphasis on community has become one of the defining characteristics of Invictus. Sport provides the framework, but relationships provide the lasting foundation. Training sessions become opportunities for encouragement. Competitions become opportunities for reconnection. Families who may have spent years watching loved ones struggle begin to witness renewed confidence. Children see parents rediscover joy. Partners see hope return. Friends witness resilience becoming visible once again. Harry's speech recognized all of those dimensions without becoming sentimental. Instead of presenting recovery as something that happens overnight, he described it as a process supported by practical programs, partnerships, and policies. He acknowledged that genuine progress requires people and institutions to learn from one another rather than working in isolation. That is perhaps why the venue itself carried significance. Chatham House has long been associated with discussions involving international affairs, diplomacy, and public policy. Holding an Invictus conversation there symbolized that support for veterans is not simply a charitable concern, it is also a matter of public policy, international cooperation, healthcare, research, and long-term investment. Recovery doesn't happen because people wish for it. It happens when governments, organizations, communities, and individuals work together to create opportunities that endure. As Birmingham prepares to host the Invictus Games in 2027, conversations like this become increasingly important. Hosting the Games is about far more than preparing sporting venues. It involves strengthening partnerships, developing support networks, and ensuring that the legacy extends beyond the closing ceremony. Harry's speech reflected that broader vision. The Games can inspire, but lasting impact depends on what happens before, during, and long after the athletes return home. Listening to Harry speak, it becomes clear that he continues to frame Invictus not as a personal achievement, but as a shared movement. Again and again, he returned to the language of community, partnership, and collective effort. Rather than placing himself at the center of the story, he directed attention toward the veterans, families, volunteers, professionals, and organizations whose work make the movement possible. In an era when public attention is often pulled toward controversy and conflict, there is something refreshing about seeing a discussion centered on practical solutions and human resilience. It may not generate the loudest headlines, but it speaks to issues that affect real people long after television cameras leave the room. The applause that welcomed Harry into Chatham House marked the beginning of that conversation. His words then shifted the focus away from himself and toward those whose courage continues long after their military service has ended. Whether someone has followed the Invictus Games from the beginning or is only learning about them now, the message remains remarkably consistent. Gratitude is important, but opportunity changes lives. And perhaps that is the central takeaway from this event. The Invictus Games have never been solely about winning competitions. They are about restoring confidence, rebuilding identity, strengthening communities, and reminding people that recovery is not defined by what has been lost, but by what can still be achieved. Harry's remarks at Chatham House brought that philosophy into sharp focus, offering a reminder that the strongest legacy is often measured not in headlines or applause, but in the lives transformed long after the audience has gone home. One point that deserves even more attention is Harry's choice of language. He never described veterans as people who should simply be pitied or viewed through the lens of what they have lost. Instead, he spoke about opportunity, identity, confidence, and purpose. That may sound like a subtle difference, but it completely changes the conversation. It shifts the focus away from limitation and toward potential. The message is not that these men and women need sympathy to move forward. The message is that they deserve every chance to build meaningful lives on their own terms, supported by communities and institutions that recognize both their sacrifices and their capabilities. That philosophy has become one of the defining principles behind the Invictus movement and helps explain why it has resonated with participants from so many different nations. It was also telling that Harry repeatedly emphasized learning from one another. In a room filled with government officials, military representatives, charities, healthcare professionals, and international partners, he wasn't presenting Invictus as a finished model with all the answers. Instead, he described progress as something that happens when people share ideas, challenge assumptions, and work together across borders. That approach reflects the reality that no single country or organization has solved every challenge facing veterans. Recovery, rehabilitation, employment, mental health support, and family services all benefit when people are willing to exchange knowledge rather than compete for recognition. In many ways, the conversation at Chatham House demonstrated that the Invictus movement has grown beyond an event into an international network committed to continuous improvement. Perhaps what stood out most throughout Harry's remarks was the consistency of his message over the years. Whether speaking at an opening ceremony, visiting competitors during training, or addressing experts at a policy forum like this one, the central theme remains remarkably unchanged. The spotlight has never been intended to stay on the founder or the organizers. It always returns to the competitors, their families, and the journey of recovery that begins long before anyone steps onto the field of play. That consistency has helped establish Invictus as more than a sporting event. It has become a community built on resilience, mutual respect, and the belief that service may change a person's life forever, but it does not define the limits of what that person can still achieve. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.